I actually went into very, very deep meditation. That was one of the first times that I think I had gone into, and I could just feel my entire body vibrating with the energy of that place. It was so powerful for me, and I got a vision of Ma Kali. Okay, I lost my grandmother when I was about 13. She comes to me very often when I need her. We realized that there was a part of her that was very scared, and a part of her that really didn't want to come back to her because it did not feel safe, right? And we had to work on it quite a few times to be really, because what the role of the shaman is to communicate.
Hi, this is Akanksha. If you're new here, please subscribe to my channel. If you resonate with me, please like, comment, and share. Welcome to Multidimensional Soul podcast and a talk show. On this show, we talk about deep spiritual and mystical experiences of people which we normally shy away talking about. We discuss science, technology, and spirituality point of views and perspectives on this show. Our purpose is to open our minds to limitless possibilities and our hearts to love and shine the light within bright. Our guest today is Vasudha Jha. Vasudha has had extensive corporate experience, and after she quit her corporate job, she started her own venture into deep transformation coaching. So she's a deep transformation coach, a shamanic healer, a family constellation facilitator, tarot card reader. In today's conversation, we talk deeply about shamanic journeys. We talked about shamanic healing, her own spiritual journey, how she integrates shamanic healing in family constellations, what are the common misconceptions about shamanism, and some experiences of her clients and her deep spiritual experiences. And for our audience, she also conducted a beautiful shamanic journey and she gave us a small ritual. A very interesting, in depth conversation with Vasudha. I loved it. I hope you love it too. We have with us today Vasudha Jha, and Vasudha is a shamanic healer, family constellations expert. A very warm welcome, Vasudha, on Multidimensional Soul podcast and a talk show. It's lovely to have you here.
Thank you, Akanksha. Thank you for having me here. I think it's a privilege, and very happy to have a conversation with you today. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. So, can you tell us about your journey? I understand that you come from a lineage which is different because you have initiations from Kamakhya Devi, and I would say there are so many things known about Kamakhya Devi that are secret and very mystical and mysterious. So, can you explain what is it that you received in the initiation? What have been your experiences so far?
Yes, my lineage is a bit interesting because my great grandmother's father, okay, so that is the fourth generation. He was the Maharaja of Darbhanga. Darbhanga is near Madhubani, so everybody knows Madhubani paintings and all that. So it's like a twin city, and he was a Siddh tantric, and he was also known as a Buddhist siddha. He had received his siddhi at the Kamakhya temple. Not He would do a lot of worship at the Kamakhya temple, but at the top of the hill there is Bhubaneswari temple. So he had actually received his siddhi at the Bhubaneswari temple. He had also got the Kamakhya temple reconstructed after the earthquake in 1898. Our family is considered to be patrons of Kamakhya, and we are very big bhakts. We have a lot of faith in her, and I think that's where things come into your DNA, And for me, this whole spiritual quest and spiritual practices, I think, have come from the seeds in my family. I was a very normal, corporate slave, if you may say. For many many years, I was in the leadership teams doing corporate affairs. Really out in the world and everything. And to be very honest, as a child, while there was a lot of spirituality in the family, we've always been very secular family. I mean, we had all kinds of people at home, but at the same time, I was not particularly spiritual or religious. Like, for instance, I'll just tell you that I remember, as I was in ninth or 10th standard when I went to Guwahati with my father, and he told me that I'm going to the Kamakhya temple. You want to come along with me? And I said, no, I don't want to go to temple. I'll stay here and have fun with my cousins, etc. But I think what somehow, when the calling comes, it just happens. And that's what happened with me around, I think this was in 2018, around December. But I've always loved going to temples. I've almost completed 9 Jyotirlings and a whole lot of other temples. I've been to Stonehenge. So I've been to places which have a lot of spiritual energy. And in 2018, around December, there was nothing special. And just this thought came into my mind that 2019, I have to go and do darshan of Kamakhya, Ma Kamakhya. And in my mind, in my heart, I just said, Ma, I must come and see you, so you have to call me. It was magical, actually, because 2019, January, there was a CSR conference in Guwahati. And I was called to speak there. And for me, I did not ever think that it would happen so fast. I think that's where my journey really started. And like I said, it's continued since then. I've always enjoyed working with people. I have always had this innate thing about sensing people's energies, about sensing how somebody is feeling. That empathetic thing has always been there. I've also, at work, I was also very good at knowing what talents do people have and really bringing those teams together. So, and somehow people have always come to me, and they've always confided in me, and I have always known a lot more about people than most people around me. So I think this whole urge to work, to serve, has always been there. And I started my life coaching practice and training in 2015. 2016, I trained as a coach, and then I also started working on learning different modalities. Shamanism was something that I don't even know how I got into it. I was just drawn into it, just reading and just learning. And then I realized that this is something that is really speaking to my soul. It really spoke to me about how I should learn more and do more. And then I got into family constellations. Family constellations is very close to shamanic work in many ways, because you're working at a spirit level, you're working at a soul level. So yeah, I think this was the kind of genesis of my spiritual journey. Earlier this year, inspired by you, I also visited the Mahavatar Babaji caves. I went to Neem Karoli Baba's ashram. I went to the Haida Khan ashram, and that also just happened. I had no intention of going to any of these places, and just one fine day, I was like, I should go there. And I called up a friend of mine, and normally she does not agree so fast to anything. But that day she said, you know what? Somebody was in my house just now, and they insisted that I go to Mahavatar Babaji caves. And we just made a plan, and the next week we went. And, after I came back from there, I think, I have been a different person. There has been some very strong energy which is kind of which has been very uplifting, and which has been very nurturing, very very close to my soul. So I think that's where I am today.
Wow. Yeah, I'm so happy that I asked you to go to Mahavtar Babaji caves, there's some acceleration, some magic, some miracle that happens when you go to the caves and meditate over there.
Yeah.
You had a very, very, I would say, multifaceted journey of different spiritual paths that you have followed. In terms of shamanism, and can you explain to people what shamanism is? Because in India, it's yet not so popular. People
Yes.
usually associate shamanism with only ayahuasca experiences, and that's why it is important to throw some light on what is shamanism. And because your upbringing has been Hindu upbringing, so
Yeah.
much so that so the initiation in Kamakya Devi's lineage. So, what are the differences and similarities between shamanism and Hinduism? Can you just explain all of that?
I think I missed telling you about my initiation, because what happens in so we are from Mithilanchal, which is considered to be the land of Sita. And whatever religious practices that we have are mostly based on religious tenets, on tantric tenets. In our culture, there is this tradition that there is a mantra which is given, either to the bahu or even to the daughter. And so I have also been initiated into that practice, and it's a secret mantra that we have. And the Devi is also secret, and we are basically Devi worshippers, right? We worship Kali. So yes, so I was initiated into it in 2016, and that's one practice that I completely stick to. Now, coming to shamanism, most religions in the world, okay, have been animistic, which means fundamentally that when we started off as, primitive, tribes, or, when there was no organized religion, right? That time the worship was nature worship, right? You worship the animals, you worship the snake, you worship the cow, and we still do it, right? And see, shamanism for thousands of years has been a very core spiritual practice of the people who've been close to nature. Shamanism is a term where you actually work with spirits. Okay, those can be spirits of the nature, those can be spirits of your ancestors, those can be your spirits of the table, the chair, the laptop that we are working on. So shamanism really believed that everything has a soul and a spirit. Okay, and that was what our ancient people also believed in, right? There is not much difference from that perspective on the core thought behind shamanism. But one of the things that really distinguishes shamanism from any other religion is that it's not so ritualistic, first of all, and secondly, journeying is a very important part of shamanism. Okay, so when you are a shamanic practitioner, you get your messages, or you get, the divination or the healing or whatever is done on the basis of a journey. And now that journey is different kinds of journey. Really, there are two kinds of reality in shamanism. One is the ordinary reality, where you and I are having this conversation, and the non-ordinary reality. So the journeying and the messages really come from the non-ordinary reality, which is in an altered state of consciousness. Even like if I were to talk about it from a multidimensional perspective, it is a multidimensional perspective, right? So we are not in one dimension. We are not stuck in linear time. We can move ahead, we can move backwards, we can see what is happening. And that happens in contact with, when you're tuned in, when you move to that non-ordinary reality. Now, coming to the what you said about ayahuasca. Yes, ayahuasca is practiced mostly in the tribes of Amazon. So shamanism is known in certain parts of the country. So this is North America, South America, Siberia, then there are parts of China, Mongolia. So these are places where shamanism is known in the way that we understand it today. ayahuasca is something, it's a psychedelic drug, right? And it is not just a psychedelic drug. There is a process to create. It's a plant. Ayahuasca is actually a plant. And when the shamans work with ayahuasca, they work with the spirit of the plant. So there is a whole process where it has to be prepared properly. It has to be done with chanting, with ritual. So it's not just that, somebody's made you run it in the mixie, get the leaves. It has to be a full conversation with the plant. It has to be with the permission of the plant. So that is ayahuasca. So I did a 1 year program with an organization called the Foundation of Shamanic Studies Europe. So Foundation of Shamanic Studies has been founded by an anthropologist called Michael Hanna, who spent a lot of time in the Amazon forest, in Siberia, and a lot of other places where shamanism was very active. And what he realized, that it is not just psychedelics that can get you to those altered states of consciousness, but also sonic drumming. So rattling, drumming, any kind of sound which is duck, 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 duck sound will put you in an altered state of consciousness. So the entire work that is done in core shamanism is based on the sonic principles of drumming or different sounds. Okay, song, music, all of that. And that's how the shaman goes into an altered state of consciousness. And that's how therefore, when we talk about shamanism, we don't necessarily talk ayahuasca or mushrooms or any other psychedelic drugs. Yeah, so I also wanted to tell you that shamans, in most of these cultures, were basically healers, right? These healers were those who brought the wisdom of the spirits to their people. Okay, so they were like, I don't want to use the word medium, but they were a bridge. They were a bridge between the spirits and the people that he would work with. Their primary task was to bring the power of the compassionate helping spirits to heal the sick, for divination, to address day-to-day problems. So basically, shamans were the elders, mostly elders in a particular tribe or in a community or whatever. And shamans could be men or women. So it was not like that it was a very male thing or whatever. So shamanism started reducing and disappearing and being practiced in secret because when organized religion came in, whether it was Christianity, whether it was Buddhism in China, or whatever other religions were there, they wanted, of course, people to follow organized religion. And they started pushing the shamans into hiding. Or they started killing them, and they started hurting them, and like they eliminated witches, thing that we hear about, Ireland and Europe and everywhere, where they were putting people on stakes and burning them. So it was a similar thing that happened with shamanism, and therefore the number of shamans reduced and went into hiding. But when it started opening up, now gradually a lot of people are working on shamanism, different kinds of work that they're doing, and it's very, very popular in the West. In India, yes, it's still not so well known.
We talked about altered states of consciousness through the instruments and through the sound.
Right.
Now, in Hinduism, you achieve these altered states, and the yogis say that through meditation or through chanting. Can you talk about these altered states? What kind of experiences you have had or your clients have had, and what kind of techniques did you use to get there?
See, the technique that I use is what I've learned, okay, which is the drumming technique. Okay, so there is a certain rhythm to the drumming that is there, and also rattling. So working with rattles and drums and sound and when you're in that state of consciousness, sound comes to you on its own. Songs come to you on its own. You must have seen that if you're walking in the park and you're in a, sometimes we automatically go into that meditative state, right, which is an altered state of consciousness where you are in ordinary reality, but you're not really fully operating it. And then you get some music, you get some ideas, you get some thoughts. So that's how I work, because that's the training that I have received. When I started my shamanic practice, and when I started learning, and I've also had mentors who have taken me through a lot of shamanic training one on one as well, based in the US. And so my one of the most powerful messages that I have received is that I have to heal my ancestral line. So as I told you, our ancestral history is very interesting. And when you come from a family like this, there are huge complications. I mean, every family has complications, right? But when you're in the public eye, when you're in in a different situation, then of course different kind of issues happen. And so I've had my journey of whatever I went through in childhood, or even after in adulthood. And I realized that a lot of it comes from family trauma. And I always had this feeling that there's something that I have to do. When I got this message, it was really really significant for me, because it kind of really confirmed what I felt within myself. Within my soul, what I felt all this time was confirmed to me. And I think I have done a lot of healing there with my clients. I also work on something called soul retrieval, which is so there's a lot of meditations, etc., that we do. And we work, again, you work with the cycles of the moon, or cycle of the, you work with the solstices, you work with equinoxes, you work with the moon. Everything has its own intention. You need to set those intentions for every activity. Soul retrieval is another technique which is within shamanism. There are a lot of specialized kind of work that we can do with clients. Okay, so soul retrieval, beyond healing, beyond divination, there's something called soul retrieval, where when we go through certain trauma, we say that a part of our soul leaves us and goes. And that's why, while people don't understand exactly what is being said, but we also say that we are all fragmented beings, right? Soul retrieval is a very important part of shamanism, because what happens is that you actually journey to find the client's soul, and bring it back to the client. And that creates these healing layers of healing. Of course, no healing is done in one go, right? It happens over and over again. So that's one of the work that I do. And the other is psychopomp. So psychopomp is not something that I have yet worked on, because again, it's a very very specialized process, and I'm still training to get there. So psychopomp is basically helping people who are dying to get to a place where, to just ease their passing. Ease their passing and really guide the soul to a place where they're content, and they're not moving away from your question a bit. So in shamanism, there are three worlds. So there is the upper world, the lower world, and the middle world. Now, it's not like Swarg, Nark, वैसा नहीं है. Okay, it is not like that. It is upper world has your counselors, your guides, your those kind of people, and the lower world has your spirit animals and your your entourage kind people who support you. So it is not that the lower world is dark world and high upper world is, it's all the same, right? But it's divided into different parts. And the middle world is the earth, the world we are in. The upper world and the lower world have spirits which are evolved. The middle world has a mix of spirits. So there are spirits that are lost, there are spirits that are evolved, there are who have come to serve, people like us, and the rest of the mankind. So a lot of times what happens is that when a person is not willing to go, sometimes the spirit goes and gets stuck in the middle world, and it is lost. So to make sure that the passing is smooth, and you're not lost and stuck in the middle world. The shamans do the journeying and work. But coming back to soul retrieval, see, what happens a lot of times is that when somebody, like I said, somebody goes through trauma, okay, and I had a client who had been sexually abused as a child, okay, and she, if you met her, she seemed to be very normal, but she could never, she was unable to complete things that she started. She would really start with a lot of energy in certain projects, and then she would go and get stuck somewhere. There was something that kind of kept her stuck. And the other part was that she was also not able to shed layers of her body, which was again making her sluggish, and again making her not unable to achieve her goals. So when we started working with her, we realized that there was a part of her that was very scared, and a part of her that really didn't want to come back to her because it did not feel safe, right? And we had to work on it quite a few times to be really, because what the role of the shaman is to communicate with that part. So, like, for instance, when we do the difference is that when we do inner child work, or things like that, it is the client who communicates with the inner child, right? It is not a third party who's communicating. But in shamanism, when you do soul retrievals, it is the role of the shaman to negotiate, because there is a negotiation. A lot of times, because it's afraid, it doesn't want to come and integrate with the person's soul, right? So we had to do about 5 or 6 sessions to bring the soul back. But finally we managed to kind of integrate it, and we completed this particular process. Of course, there are a lot of other things that she still has to do, but once we completed this process, over a period of time, there was a complete transformation that she went through, because somehow within herself she started feeling very complete. She constantly would feel that there's some emptiness within her, which kind of got completed, which kind of got filled in a way with the love, with that soul part that had gone back to her. And she's in a much better place now. She's achieving much better. She's managed to lose a few pounds. So overall, there has been a huge difference in her life, I would say, working with spirits in the shamanic way. So yeah, so that's one of the stories that I can share with
Yeah, thank you for sharing this. Very deep. And soul retrieval, I think, is very important. On one level, we say that our soul is whole because we are made as one soul. But when we go through trauma, a part of it gets lost, and it's important to integrate that thing. So when you said that key difference between, let's say, inner child healing or other modalities versus shamanic healing modality, is that the shaman sees the soul and negotiates. So
you.
do you actually see the soul? Do you hear? Is it like mediumship kind of a thing, or how does it work? Is it channeling? How does that work?
I would not call it mediumship, but it could be similar to channeling. Again, like I said, in shamanism, journeying is the key part, right? So you have to first find where the soul part is. So through the drumming and the chanting and the song and the whatever music that you have to actually go and find the soul part. I'll give you an example. Like, for instance, I was working with somebody else, and this lady is based in Canada, and she had a childhood in a very snowy part of in a very cold part of Canada, where she is. And when I started journeying for her, I what I could actually go to was a cottage, There was a frozen river and there was a cottage. There was a child that was stuck in the river and it didn't want to come out. And see, it's not that you go into that altered state of consciousness and you can't come back. So you have to come back and connect with the client and see whether you're on the right track. I mean, it's not that we doubt what we see, because we don't. What comes to us in that state. And she told me actually that she had fallen into the river. She was feeling stuck, and there was nobody who could actually save her at that point of time. So this was a very significant trauma. So she was found after a very long time. So basically, you go to the place where the soul is stuck. Sometimes it can be like somebody had journeyed for me, and they had journeyed into a cave which was wet and damp, and there was a younger version of me which was sitting on a chair, and I was tied up. So they actually saw me there. Okay, and then that conversation then happens. So you actually, as the shaman, you have to first find where the soul is. In common parlance, we can call it channeling, but in shamanic language, you would call it journey.
When you talked about using drumming as a technique, in Hinduism, we know that there are certain instruments associated with each chakra. And if you want to achieve the altered states, is typically you have to reach the higher chakras. But drumming is associated with the root chakra or Mooladhara chakra. How does that work? How does the consciousness rise or ascend with this technique?
I don't think that where shamanism is concerned, I don't think it's connected with any chakra, because there is no system of chakras in shamanism. It is more the rhythm which kind of gets you into that, like how when we go to a pub and there's this techno music playing, you automatically get into a trance, right? You don't need you can be high on drugs, but you don't really need to be high on drugs. So it's similarly when the drumming is at a certain in a certain way, the shaman goes into a trance. So it is like it's a trance, it's an altered state of consciousness. I don't know if it is about ascension, but it is about moving to a different reality. The reality where you will get your guidance from the spirits that you're looking for, from your helping spirits. So one of the things that we most which is most common in shamanism is having an animal spirit guide. So again, your animal guide will come to you, your spirit guide will come to you when you're drumming and in your altered state of consciousness. So
Yeah.
that's how the guide also comes to you.
Yeah, exactly. That's the next question I had about the spirit guide. So when
Okay.
you start this technique and when you start going into altered states of consciousness, is it that your spirit guides and higher selves come, or only the client's spirit guides and higher selves come? Do the angels come? How do you invoke them, or how does it happen?
When we go on a journey, we invoke our spirit guides and our spirit animals to come along with us, okay, and to protect us. Because a lot of times the places that we have to reach are not accessible by us. So it is up to our spirit animals to take us to those places and to be with us for whatever support is needed. So when a shaman does a journey, it does it with its own spirit guides and helpers. So it is not the clients, it is our own spirit animals, spirit guides, whoever we kind of work with. So there is this council that we work with, right? So they can be anybody. They can be ancestors, they can be us, they can be spirit guides, they can be spirits of a particular tree or a animal or whatever it is. Even when we talk about ancestors in shamanism, Akanksha, ancestors are not of one type. Okay, ancestors can be of different types. Okay, so I'll give you. So typically, when we say ancestor, we think about blood ancestors. Okay, our parents, grandparents, whatever. But there can be ancestors of the land that we're in, or the land that we were born in. So they can be ancestors of the land. There can be ancestors of the heart, people who we looked up to, people who were friends. There could be, ancestors, cultural ancestors. Yeah, so they're different kinds of ancestors that one can work with, right? So it's not just blood ancestors again. So again, it depends on the work that you're doing, who you would invoke. And again, I want to just tell you this about when I'm talking about ancestors. I just want to tell you one commonality between this whole various ancestors that I just spoke about and how it works in Hinduism. And I got to know about this because see, in I think our ancient uh, people, whoever wrote the scriptures and the Vedic rituals and everything, whoever did, they were brilliant people, right? They were they knew everything, and it is just amazing how they did. But last year I went to Gaya to do a pinddan for my parents. Okay, so when you do pinddan for your parents, you also do the next 6 generations automatically. But there is a provision where there are, I think, 5 or 6 people that you can do pinddan for, who may not be related to you and who may have passed. So for me, I did it for a very close friend of mine who passed during COVID. Then there was, there was this person that we had at home who used to work with us. Okay, as when I was a child, and his many generations of his family used to work with our family. So he was like all in one kind of a person in our family. He was a cook, he was the driver, he was the man Friday, everything. He's the one who taught me how to make rotis actually. And I was so attached to him. When I was told that you could do it for somebody else, I did it for him also. So he is my ancestor of the heart, right? So similarly, there are a lot of these spirits that we work with who are helping spirits for us. They are our counsel. They are our people. And yes, no, angels are not. Don't come into the picture unless the practitioner has somebody that they invoke. But at the same time, there are some practitioners, family constellations practitioners, who do shamanic constellations, because there are a lot of parallels between shamanism and family constellations. Because again, family constellations works with your ancestors and your family of origin and things like that, where they do invoke these benign energies, like the Arcturians or the Pleiadians. And in a lot of these shamanic constellations, you do see certain dark energies, like the reptilians, etc. So then, yeah, then at that point of time, we do invoke angels to protect us, to be with us, guide us. But in core shamanism, no, angels don't really come into the picture.
When we talk about trauma and soul being fragmented, and you just touched upon that point that you see dark energies at that time, because typically this happens when there is huge trauma, and that is when the soul, the part of the soul, goes in darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, how do you then protect yourself? What do you do to protect yourself and your client so that you don't get entangled over there and you manage to bring that part back to the soul, integrate it?
Okay. So before I go there, I want to tell you that what you just said about the soul part going in darkness, in shadow, it's different. Okay. This is different from shadow work again. Because when we say the shadow, we say the repressed part of the soul, which is the part that has been traumatized. Maybe it's a different way of looking at it, but here we say a soul part which is lost and detached from you. So it is not with you at all. It is not either in your shadow or in your consciousness. And of course, see, there is a lot of protection that is needed when you're doing shamanic work. So we start with clearing the energy. We start with clearing your own energy. You don't do shamanic work if your energy is not 100%. You have to be completely clear in your heart and mind. You have to have that alignment to be able to do any shamanic work, any work where you're working with the spirits. Plus you have to ensure that you don't have negative energy coming into your space. So we sage our space. We use Palo Santo. We light candles. We and there is a lot of prayer. Like today, we started with a prayer. We set intention, and we protect. Without protection, you don't really. And at the end of it, you have to. Again, there are methods of clearing yourself of the energy of the other person. So we do all that is required, because and that kind of becomes an important ritual in shamanism, because as a shamanic practitioner as well as the client, we need to be protected, because you're in a vulnerable space. I mean, whenever you work with spirits or you work on something that is not in our ordinary reality, and especially when as a person, you are prone to attracting all kinds of energies. So first your energy has to be very clean, and the energy around you has to be also clean. So I mean, I have a lot of my personal rituals that I do, and a lot of times, because you're so tuned into what you do and how you do it, uh, a lot of times when there is some kind of energy that is in your space which you're not comfortable with. So then again, that whole process of cleansing and crystals, and so I have also learned crystal healing. So if you've come to my house, I don't know whether you saw all the crystals all over, so I have crystals in every part of my house. So yeah, I protect my energy and the energy of my space. And also what happens is that when you start doing this kind of work, Akanksha, you end up, maybe that's not the right way to put it, but you end up being a little distance from people, in the sense that you tend to kind of be away from. I have a problem. I cannot spend a lot of time in a big crowd. With a lot of people, I tend to get a little overwhelmed. And it was not like this, because I have always been a very social person, and I love having people around. I love cooking for my friends. I love having, but then you become, because you know what energies, and when you're in a crowd, there are different kinds of energies, right? And you, if you tend to pick it up, right? I have, every time I go out, I have to come back, have a shower, salt water, this, that, the other, everything I do. I protect my energy, and B, I think I am also compelled to protect my energy, right? Because it becomes very uncomfortable sometimes, when when you have all that soup energy coming at you. So I'm very cautious from that perspective.
Yeah, no, when I talked about detached part being in the darkness, I didn't talk about shadows.
Mm.
I know I do shadow work myself. I coach people on shadow work. So shadow is the repressed or suppressed parts of your own subconscious. But when
Yes.
part of your soul is fragmented, it just kind of gets separate from you, and somewhere it is there in the collective unconscious.
Right.
So, but still, at the end of the day, it is fragmented because it has gone through very dark, deep kind of trauma.
You're
And
absolutely right. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
so
I
that's
in
the
fact,
reason.
you described it very beautifully. The way you distinguished it
Yeah.
was nice. Yeah.
So, how do you use shamanism as part of healing modality, combining with, let's say, family constellation or any other modality? Because I do know that you are an expert in family constellation, and your unique specialty is that you combine shamanism in that. So, how do you do that? Can you just explain it?
what happens is, when you look at the common parts of shamanism and family constellations, okay, the commonality between shamanism and family constellations is, you can say, it's the knowing field, because family constellations, if works in a knowing field, right? So the way that events are revealed, or the way the things come to the fore in a family constellation, is through that morphological field, right? And that is the same field, I would think, that a shamanic practitioner taps into, when they want to do some kind of healing, or divination, or look for. And okay, so it's not just, shamanism does not just help you look for lost parts. It can help you, you can do a shamanic journey to look for a lost item also. So it will tell you. In fact, I had done, one of the so one of my dreams is to have, a retreat center where, we can do a lot of this healing work, etc. And I was doing, as part of my course, I did, they made us, really find the place where I would be able to have my center. So within shamanic journey, you can also ask people to guide you as to where you have to do something, the place. Okay, you have to look for things. So anyway, so I was digressing. But family constellation, so that's the knowing field that you work in, right? And what happens is that, when you are, as a person, because I started doing tarot at a very young age, and I did crystal healing, reiki, my whole initiation, the tantric initiation that I've spoken to you about, all that has made, and the shamanic the practice that I have, and family, has made my intuition very strong. Okay, so what happens with that is that, uh, and when you're doing a family constellations practice, okay, you bring in a lot of your intuition, because when you look at the field, when you look at how the people are moving, or how the people are placed, you have to work at the spirit of your, at the level of your intuition. Okay, and that is what you also bring in when you do your shamanic journeys. So when your intuition is deep, and you're tuned into it, when you're really tuned into that part of who you are, you will be able to a be better at the shamanic work as well as family constellations work. So while, again, like I said, and the whole rituals of protecting yourself, and calling in the spirit guides, and calling in the protectors, all of that you also do before you do a family constellations practice. So uh, in term, and your you become sharper at really seeing what is happening in a constellation, because you have the ability to tune into that, no, the non-ordinary reality. So you may be working with a client, or you may be working with a group of people, but when you're in that field, you tend to be drawn into it in many different ways, and which are very personal to you, because you create your own method, and you create your own way um, of tuning into that particular field, or the particular client, or the particular problem. You have that insight.
Okay. Shamanism places a deep emphasis on working with nature. So,
Yes.
have you had any experiences where you got any downloads, let's say from the trees or unexpected places in nature? Or can you explain why this connection with nature is so important in shamanism?
See, because shamanism is, and like I said, it is an animistic practice. So we have to tune into the spirits of nature. Even before you start a shamanic practice, you invoke the directions: east, west, north, south. You invoke the sun and the earth and the moon, and so uh, shamanism cannot be taken away uh, from nature. You have your animal guides, you have your spirits, so you have to be very, very connected to nature. And I think, for me as a person, I have always been very close to nature. Okay, even and to for me, living in a city sometimes becomes a little overwhelming for me. So eventually I would want to move into a place of nature. Even as a child, I would come home with my tiffin box full of seeds and grass and flowers, and I would have flower in my hair. I still collect stones. Any place that I go, I kind of bring something from there. So I also I have this hobby that, when I'm sitting idle and I don't feel like, I don't know what to do, or I'm just kind of doing nothing, I paint bookmarks. So every place I go, like for instance, when I went to Mahavtar Babaji's cave, I got those ferns and different looking leaves from them. So I press them, I dry them, and then, they are like a good luck charm for my friends. I send it to my friends, I give it to people, things like that. I honestly, I don't remember having a download in a place of nature, but every place that I go, uh, I just connect with the earth. I just connect with the trees. In fact, there is a picture of me at the Haida Khan ashram, where I'm just there. If you remember the ashram, on the right hand side, there's a very big tree, and I'm actually holding the tree and just completely lost in that moment, because it was just so, you feel so peaceful. You just feel that, your whole system is kind of getting rewired. So that's the experience that I have with nature. I try my best to, be close to whatever I can. So yeah, so that's the connection with nature and shamanism.
Oh, beautiful. When we talk about nature, we talk about Earth,
Mhm.
and Earth is now moving into fifth dimension, the higher vibration. We all are ascending,
Right.
and there's a lot of chaos happening.
Right.
And we know that Mother Earth is a sentient being,
Mm-hmm.
and Earth has gone through a lot of trauma herself. There are so
Mm-hmm.
many wars, there is so much destruction. Now, in all of this, how does shamanism work in ascension? What do you recommend that people do? What kind of practices can they do and take advantage of shamanic practices in this ascension? And how do you relate this entirely what is happening right now in terms of Earth's ascension?
That's a beautiful question, actually. One of the things that is happening right now is that, like you said, we're stuck in a pretty dysfunctional world right now. There is so much of disease, there's so much of poverty, there is so many wars, mental illness, violence, all of that. Right now, I think the work that you're doing is very brilliant, and the people that you're working with, because we need transformed, evolved humans in large numbers. The only way we can bring balance into the world today is by having more people move into a spiritual realm, okay, and work with others, right? Because what is happening is, problems are growing faster than we can fix them, okay. And that was the reason why one of the things that Michael Hanna, when he started this whole, when he the institute, the Foundation of Shamanic Studies, and the whole core shamanism, the idea was to bring more people into the fold. Like, for instance, if that course was not available to me online, I would never be able to learn or go deep into the practices, or even understand, because there is a lot of random information about all spiritual practices. Like people say negative things about tantric practices, they say negative things about shamanism. Everything has a negative connotation, and typically we tend to look at things very negatively, right? I would never be able to connect with people internationally. Okay, so the other thing that I would like to say is that all of us have the seed to be a lot more than what we perceive ourselves to be. So we tend to limit ourselves because we feel कि अरे ये तो बहुत बड़ी चीज है, हमसे नहीं होगा. That's the whole thing. We do not have the confidence in our own abilities. But I think it's very important for people to start exploring, working with practitioners, doing something that can bring about more equilibrium in this world. Okay. But beyond that, I would also like to say one very simple thing, that all of this, like shamans also, when you talk about shamanism, shamans are called wounded healers. Because initially, what was happening with you would be called, when you called into shamanism, you would either fall ill, you would have a near death experience, you would go through something so critical where the only choice that you would have was to become a shaman or lose your life, or be riddled with disease or whatever. So people didn't have an option but become shamans, right? And so we have all gone through a process of healing ourselves before you can think of doing any work with anybody else, right? So even if people just simply start healing themselves, I think a lot of this negativity will be able to reduce. We'll be able to create that world which is more loving, which is more functional. You know, that's what I think.
You have practiced both Tantra from lineage of Kamakhya Devi and shamanism. And there are a lot of misconceptions about both. So, can you just explain to our audience what are the misconceptions that are there about Tantra as well as shamanism, and how can you get rid of them?
See, I haven't practiced Tantrism. I have just been initiated into the mantra, okay, which I practice every day. So I don't think I even know the basics of Tantra as such. So with full humility, I have no, but yes, I can talk about the perceptions. Okay, so the typical perception about tantric practices is vashikaran. Basically, matlab ki, when if you can harm somebody else and get your work done, that is something that a tantric can do for you. Okay, or even with shamanism, because you become, in working with the spirits, you have the power, to impact somebody's life positively or negatively. You can do that, right? But for, again, coming from a tantric culture and having studied shamanism, the only thing that I can say is, in both the methods, it is very clear that it should not be used for harmful purposes, right? Because the way is to manipulate energies, right? The way you're working is by manipulating a certain kind of energy, and that energy, when you use it to harm somebody, the energy knows you and the energy knows the target, right? So once the energy is done with the target, where will it go? It will come back to you, right? People who have the knowledge and who misuse it, okay, eventually you will see that they will suffer themselves, and they suffer very, very badly. That is why, whenever somebody is practicing these modalities, which are very, very powerful, which have the ability to manipulate energy, one should be a lot more conscious about the intention and how it is being used. It should not be it should not be thrown around and misused and used to harm anybody. See, everything that we do has a capacity to harm. Everything has a dark side, Akanksha. But again, which side do you choose is the question, and why?
Yeah, absolutely. You shared so many different modalities, techniques, and different even spiritual paths, and you shared your clients' experiences. I would like to know your deepest and most profound experiences on any of the spiritual paths. Can you share that?
See, okay, I'll tell you about this one time when I was living in Bombay, and there is the temple of the Jivdani temple. Have you been there? They say that the Devi's tongue has fallen there. That's also Shakti Peeth. It's in Virar. Okay, it's near Virar, and and you have to really climb up. It's very high on the hill, and it has a very, very strong energy. Most of these Shakti Peeths, as you know, have these where they used to do animal sacrifice, right? Now they don't do it anymore, but and those places become very, very energy. They full of that energy at that point of time. So when I went up there, so we did darshan and all that, and then on the terrace is the place where they used to do the sacrifice, etc. And I just sat down to meditate over there. I actually went into very, very deep meditation. That was one of the first times that I think I had gone into, and I could just feel my entire body vibrating with the energy of that place. It was so powerful for me, and I got a vision of Ma Kali. Okay, and that was a time when I was going through a very, very tough phase in my life, and but as I told you, going to temples and all has been like my second nature. Wherever I go, I find a temple, I do that. And I don't know how long I was in that meditative state, and I think it was about half an hour, 45 minutes. I have no idea. I just felt I felt her presence. I felt her presence. I could just see her looming in front of me, but I wasn't scared, because I think from childhood I've had a relationship with her. She was in her the Vikral roop that she is in, and I just felt this immense amount of love and protection, and you know and I think I was also probably crying or something, because the my one of my cousins who was with me, she kind of got a little worried, but she realized that I was in deep meditation, so she did not disturb me. But it was just so profound, very profound for me, and I think that that again, it changed me at a very different. It gave me a lot of courage, and it gave me the strength to to just move on from whatever I was facing at that point of time. So yeah, so I think that was very deep, and that was very very profound. And when we talk about ancestors, Akanksha, I must tell you that for me, I lost my grandmother when I was about 13. She comes to me very often when I need her. So I don't I when I am looking for guidance, when I'm looking for support, when I'm looking for somebody to hold my hand, I typically I get her visits, whether I'm meditating or I'm dreaming or whatever. And it's such a beautiful I feel very loved and protected at that point of time. So it's just so beautiful. And I remember once, again coming back to the shamanic journeying thing. I have been on a journey of self awareness and self understanding and self healing. All of that for many years now. And one of the life changing moments in my life was when I was going through a shamanic journey, and I was actually told that a lot of my problems and issues and everything comes from this deep need for validation. I had never ever thought about that. I had never thought about that. And then that again changed my personality, because I understood where I was going wrong. What was I doing that I shouldn't be doing? So yeah, so these were few instances which I think were pretty life altering for me.
Yeah, very powerful. Thank you for sharing those. Can you give our audience a shamanic ritual which they can practice, and can you walk us through a shamanic journey live for us here, for our audience?
Absolutely, absolutely. We could do a journey where we go out and meet our spirit guides, and also ask our spirit guides a question that is important for us. Okay, so I can take you through that journey, and I can give you a very small but very powerful ritual that anybody can do anywhere in their in a place of nature. So we could do that. Absolutely. So shall I take you through the journey now?
Yes, please.
Great. So we'll just have to close our eyes and just center yourself. We can sit in any comfortable place. You can be lying down, or anything that where you will be undisturbed for a few minutes. And I'd like you to close your eyes and look out for the nearest door. Step out of the door. As you step out of the door, you will find a veil. This is a beautiful, shimmering veil which you have to cross. This crossing of the veil will take you into a beautiful place in nature. Any place in nature that you have been to earlier, that is your favorite place, or just something in your imagination. Once you reach that place, just see a wooden bench and slowly go and sit there on the wooden bench, which is in a clearing surrounded by woods and trees. It's surrounded, the whole place is green and beautiful, surrounded by flowers, animals, butterflies, birds, everything that can make your heart absolutely joyful and happy. Imagine the sun is beating down on your face and you feel entirely safe and protected. Just feel this warmth, feel this safety, feel this protection that is coming to you from the nature around you there. And you're just sitting there on the wooden bench with your hands in your lap, soaking up the warmth of the sun. And you look around, and in the distance, there is a mountain. As you look more closely at the mountain, you discover a small winding path coming down towards you. And coming down this path, you see a source of light. that source of light illuminated and moving towards you is a beautiful, heartwarming light, which is gradually winding your way down the path and coming towards where you are seated. You also notice that there is a fence and a gate between the light that is coming to you and where you are sitting on the bench. And the light source stops outside the gate. As you look at it, it becomes clear to you that they are waiting for your permission to enter your space in nature. You nod your permission, and the light source starts coming towards you. You are filled with a feeling of well being, peace, and calm. And you also realize that you're in the presence of a beautiful higher spirit. A spirit who is also your guide. This spirit could also be your higher self. You beckon the light source of energy to come closer to you, and it moves. See it move closer to you. And you ask the spirit guide, you ask the guide, what is your name? And you will receive an understanding of a name. Just notice any emotions or feelings or sensations in your body that you experience as you make contact with the spirit. There might be a tingling in your body somewhere, might be an aroma, a symbol might appear in your mind. Just remember this. This symbol, this aroma, this sign is actually the mark of this particular spirit guide. And you can call upon this guide whenever you are in need of any guidance. Now, ask the spirit guide, what is its purpose? Is the purpose to teach you something, to guide you? Is it a musical guide, an artistic guide? What kind of guidance does it have for you? Very often, our guides have a specific purpose, and they are there to help us at a particular time in our lives. You should also ask the guide, can I trust you? Your guide will expect to be tested in this way. It is important for us to be able to trust the energy that comes to guide us. What are you feeling now? Is there a burning question that you have that you would like to ask this guide? Just go ahead and ask your question and see what comes up for you. Is there something specific that the guide is asking you to do? Where does it want to take you? Where does it want to lead you? What does it have for you? Once you have your answer or your guidance, just say thank you to your guide. Say thank you and tell the guide that I will call upon you again when I need you. And you will see that the light will shine brighter for you, because this is the guide of your heart. This is your higher self. This is your spirit guide. And once you've thanked the guide, you will see the guide go back onto the winding, go out of the gate and back onto the winding path. Go back to where it came from. And now you can begin your journey back to your room. As you come back, you will again find the beautiful shimmering veil. Just cross the veil, come inside the door that you had left from, and just find yourself here. Just reconnect with your reality and open your eyes whenever it feels good for you. Great, I hope you could meet your guide there. So, Akanksha, I'll give you a small ritual as well, okay, which our viewers can practice. Basically, this ritual is about making a small offering to the spirits. I think one of the things that we need we need to be grateful for what we have in our lives and what we get from nature, and how the spirits protect us, because a lot of times we are not even aware that we are protected, but we are always loved and protected, right? So this offering is a gift from our heart. Okay, so if there is a small object that you have, or anything small that you can leave on the land, that is what you take. And once you have your offering, just find a place in nature. It can be your terrace where you have green plants, you have your backyard, or if there's a park or any green space. And just go stand there, take a few breaths, and center yourself. Okay. And reach your hands high into the air with the offering. Okay. And imagine yourself, look up and imagine yourself fully embracing the sun or the moon, whatever time you're making this offering, and just feel and fully embrace the sun. Look up, with your arms high. Close your arms, close your eyes, breathe deeply, and experience yourself as fully as you can at the present moment. And once you've done this, just bend down or sit down and touch your palms to the earth, like that, experiencing the ground beneath you. Just feel the great power of the earth connecting to your palms. Again, close your eyes, just breathe in this connection very, very deeply, experience it fully. And when you feel complete, just leave the offering on the land. Thank your spirits for your life, for everything that you have in your life, and just sit there for a while. Close your eyes, breathe, simply just connect with yourself, connect with the ground. And you'll see that in that moment, maybe a song will come to you, or a dance, or maybe nothing. Whatever comes up for you, just enjoy it, just experience the moment, and just leave the offering on the ground and just come back. So yeah, that's the ritual, to show our gratitude to the spirits.
Thank you. That was beautiful. The journey was also beautiful, and the ritual. I just have one question about the ritual. What can you give as an offering? Is it a food item, or it can be
It can be
anything?
anything. It can be anything.
Any object, it can be anything.
It can be a little rock that you have. It can be a little coin that you have. It can be a little piece of color, food, anything that you feel to give it as an offering to the spirits.
Okay. And how many times do you recommend we do this ritual?
As many times as you want to. It's about connecting with the spirits. It just makes you more aware of the connection that we have beyond ourselves. And the question that you asked me earlier about how can we be multidimensional, so this is one way of experiencing the other dimension that is also part of us. Through a little action, we can connect with this reality, this other reality that is there in the world, and give it a place in our heart.
Beautiful. Okay, so I ask all my guests some questions in the rapid fire round. Can I
Yeah.
ask you those?
Yeah, absolutely. Ready for your rapid fire.
Okay. What is a multidimensional soul according to you? If you were to explain it to a common person, how would you explain it?
I think all of us are multidimensional souls. We just don't know it because we are so, uh, so caught up with our day-to-day lives and our responsibilities and the attachment and everything else. And if I were to explain it to somebody, see, we come to this world in this human avatar so that we can evolve, right? We can become a better version of ourselves. We can achieve. So I think that's what uh, I would help people realize. That this life that we have as humans is a gift, and that's something that we should make the most of, because all of us, we have the option to stay stuck, and we have the option to evolve ourselves and see the other parts of ourselves. And yeah, so I think that's what is important.
What is holistic well-being to you?
Holistic well-being to me is an alignment of your heart and mind. I think this is the most difficult journey that we make in this life, which is really making, and Bert Hellinger, who's the founder of Family Constellations, he said that when I was in Africa, the longest journey was not from Cairo to Cape Town. The longest journey was from my head to my heart. Okay, so when we are in alignment, our head and heart are in alignment, we know that we are on the right path. And I think that's the best guiding compass that we have, because all these issues of anxiety, depression, conflict, they all come, internal conflict, being inner critics, it all comes when we don't have this alignment, and we have to traverse that path, and that is holistic well-being for me.
Okay. What is the ultimate purpose of life according to you?
Again, if I come back to it, the ultimate purpose of life is to discover ourselves, okay, and to move to that multidimensional place that you're talking about. See, we all have our journeys. We all cannot be ascended masters, and we cannot even try to be ascended masters. But fundamentally, if we make it a purpose of our life to be vulnerable and seek healing, okay, because suffering becomes our comfort zone, and we need to change that state. So to acknowledge the bits in our life that is not working, and that is not, that we need to heal, I think it is the purpose of our life to express our souls, and we can only do that when we are truly healed. So I think it's important for each one of us to look at, finding the purpose in our life is to be whole, to become as whole as we can be in this lifetime, because only then can we be of service. If we are not whole in ourselves, we cannot be of service to others.
What is love according to you?
Love to me is the small joys that we get on a day-to-day basis. So for me, just maybe looking at this beautiful flower and feeling that happiness, or cooking a nice meal for people I love could be a source of joy. Meeting a friend suddenly in the marketplace, is a source of joy. So anything that gives you that joy, okay, whether it's people, nature, anything that you do, I think that is love.
Okay. What is self-love?
Self love again is, is to be able to be vulnerable, and to really be able to see who we are. Okay, we become very lost in being the who we are, external perception, this, that, the other, but we forget the you, right? So finding the you in the who is very important for us. And that is self love. If we can, like, make that distance, connect with our heart, and really be aligned to what it is that makes us happy, and find those joys which we call love, I think that is true self love.
Okay. What is your parting message for our audience?
My parting message to our audience would be, don't stay in your comfort zone of suffering, because yes, suffering is something that we may have chosen, but that has been chosen by us to learn certain lessons, to learn a little more about ourselves. Okay, so while I don't ask people to be overly spiritual or religious or whatever, I think it's important for us all to find that source of inspiration, okay, that can make us happy, okay, and that can help us evolve to a higher place. I think that is the message that I would, and going to that higher place is not an easy journey. It's a very tough journey. So, but we all, I think all of us are capable of making that journey. And I would urge everybody to, to find their comfort zone and step out of it, and really see where the possibilities of their soul and the evolution.
And how can people connect with you? How can they contact you?
I have a website, I have a Facebook account, I have a LinkedIn account, Insta. So I'm available on, or just simply WhatsApp. I think anybody can connect with me.
Okay. We'll give all the details in the description. It's been absolute pleasure having you as my guest on this podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Akanksha. It was lovely talking to you, and thank you for having me here.
Thank you for watching and listening in wherever you are in the world. As Ramdas says, that we all are just walking each other home. So thank you for co-creating the new earth along with me and our guests. And if you resonate with me, do subscribe to my channel and do let us know how you find our episodes. Thank you so much. Lots of love.